Hi everyone, my name is John. Welcome back to my channel. Last year I started a book for the first year of Historathon 2023, it was back then, and a lot of people were reading this, so I sort of hopped on the bandwagon, just wanting to read a good introductory text that covers a broad sweep of Plantagenet history, the English royal house. And this seems to be the go-to book. So I started it last year, but finished it in May, just maybe 6 weeks ago or so. Got halfway last year, got distracted by other things, but finally finished it. And I wanted to talk about it, as I talk about everything. This is the Plantagenets, the warrior kings and queens who made England, by Dan Jones. This came out from Viking Press in 2013 and covers the major events in English history from the crash of the White Ship, which technically happens a little bit before the first Plantagenet monarch, and the death of William Atheling in 1120 to the deposition of Richard II and the ascendancy of Henry Bolingbroke, who becomes Henry IV in 1399. And usually we think of the Plantagenets as ending with Richard III when he dies at the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485, but he cuts off when the line from Edward III splits off between the Yorks and the Lancasters. So, when Richard is deposed, you get this sort of split in the line, and he's calling that, I guess, at least in his version of the history, that is the end of the Plantagenet line for him. Although, usually the monarch after Richard III, who would be Henry VII, is the first Tudor who displaces the Plantagenet. But anyway, that's maybe another video. And but the story here is that he really ends with Richard II, not Richard III. In between those two events, the White Ship and the deposition of Henry II, you get King Stephen and Matilda, who try to duke it out over the anarchy over a period of many years. Eleanor of Aquitaine, her son, Richard I, who, of course, fights Saladin in the Third Crusade, and her other son, John, who becomes King John, who signed the Magna Carta under duress from his intransigent barons, and finally the fraying of the Plantagenet dynasty when Edward III's oldest son, Edward the Black Prince, dies before being able to take the throne and leaves the monarchy open to two what are called cadet branches, the Yorks and the Lancasters, that would decades later break out into the War of the Roses. That's a lot of history in just a few sentences, but this book does cover more than 250 years worth of history in 500 pages. So 500 pages may strike you as a somewhat long-sounding book, but it really moves at a gallop. It's a fast-paced narrative thing. Where was I? So, I wanted to just say, if you're looking for a history of the late Plantagenets, Henry IV through Richard III, you'll have to get a book that covers those, because this isn't the one. You might know Dan Jones for his reputation for being an engaging storyteller, for telling sort of fast-paced history, and that reputation is pretty well deserved. But it comes at the cost of sometimes seeing his kings as incompetent heroes or knaves. Not incompetent heroes, as heroes or incompetent knaves. And yes, despite the title of the edition that I have, from 1120 to 1399, they're all the Plantagenet monarchs are actually kings. I don't know why the title is Kings and Queens. Matilda is not really in the canon of English queens. She should have been. Her father wanted her to be queen, but King Stephen came along and sort of stole it from her. It's easy to see how King John, as a bumbling failure. It's easy to see Edward II as a bumbling failure, sort of a youthfully dissolute figure under the influence of Piers Gaveston, who is so inept a ruler that his own wife takes a lover and invades England to overthrow her own husband. It's really pretty incredible. And it's just as easy to see Richard the Lionheart or Edward III as great warriors and military heroes. But what's gained in the writing of riveting history is often sort of compromised when trying to give fully fleshed out portrayals of monarchs and all of their political and moral complexity. Granted, you can't exactly linger over the fine details when you only have 500 pages to cover and nearly 3 centuries worth of history. Many history books can easily afford to be about half as long as they are, but I think this would have been better if it was twice as long as it was, to be honest. When books are written with this kind of storytelling ability, and I think it's no coincidence that Dan Jones has recently started a series of, I think it's a trilogy of novels, and I've only heard good things about them. That's not really surprising because he writes like a novelist. It's a little bit easy to forget that you're actually reading history when you're reading Dan Jones, because it doesn't read like it's 700 years old on the page. It reads like it's a living thing. And of course it is, but it's so often written as a dry as hay thing that it is easy to forget these are historical events. Dan Jones doesn't write bad history, but the way he writes does consciously avoid, I think, some of the complexity that a lot of figures require to be fully appreciated. But that's okay. It's meant to be a popular history. It's meant to be an introduction. That's fine. In short, he writes history for someone who's kind of getting their feet wet about a topic, and that was certainly me with the Plantagenets when I read this. No mean feat. I'm not one that should be dismissed. And while this is really fun to read and really well written and really well done, and I would certainly recommend it, I hope it only stokes an interest in the Plantagenets, instead of being the end-all and be-all book that someone reads on the subject. One of the great things about the Plantagenets is that there is just a long train of popular and scholarly biographies to draw on for almost every single monarch in the book, as well as the major events, the baronial uprisings, the Peasants' Revolt, about which, by the way, Dan Jones wrote an entire book called Summer of Blood, the Peasants' Revolt of 1381. But if you get to the end and you're still interested in other things he has done, despite the fact that it is a popular, release, he has a wonderful further reading section, which is, let's see, 6 or 7 pages long and just jam-packed with, a few hundred other recommendations throughout the entire history that he writes about. So that's where I will be going after I finish my other stuff that I already have on the Plantagenets. But this is a really good grounding in a really interesting, pivotal time in English history. And moving forward, when I read more about them, it'll certainly be a point of reference, because if I forget anything, you can just go back. It's all in chronological order, so it's really easy to find things. And of course, I also just finished a book about Thomas Becket, who obviously came to a very violent end under Henry II, which I read with Erica from Passage of Time. Another amazing book I'll have to tell you about. So many great books recently, but so much stuff going on, and so many important, interesting things that happened during the Plantagenets' reign. So I would certainly recommend this. There's a really good reason it has a good reputation. It's a really solid book, and is written well. The Plantagenets, the warrior kings and queens who made England, by Dan Jones. I will see you later with more book reviews and or more bookish content. Bye.